I'm speaking with Nan Levinson. She just gave a presentation about her book, War is Not a Game. Can you tell us a bit about the book, particularly the title?
The title is War is Not a Game, and the subtitle, which I actually have to read because I can never remember it, is The New Anti-War Soldiers and the Movement They Built. Briefly, the book is about soldiers and Marines and airmen, everyone in the military, after about 9/11, largely centered around an organization called Iraq Veterans Against the War, which I hope lots of people have heard about, that has been active for 10 years now. They had their 10th anniversary. And the book follows them for a period of 18 months in 2007 to 2008, when they were most active and most effective, I think. They did various things, including the Winter Soldier hearing that was in March 2008, just outside of Washington, D.C., which was pretty much a grunt level indictment of the war, I would say, but people testifying about their experiences. And it was,
And you spoke that people had joined for a lot of reasons, patriotic reasons, anger at 9/11 and so on. But when they got over there, they saw a very different reality. They weren't really protecting this country.
That's very true. They went over, as you say, for a whole array of reasons, including idealism, and the sense that not only would they might be protecting the country, but they would be doing good in the world. And many of them, I would say all of the members of IVAW, but a lot of people who never joined, found that what they were doing there was quite the opposite. It was, a lot of them just described it as they had to get through a certain number of days, and they go out on a patrol, come back, and just kind of survive long enough to come home, and then prepare to redeploy. One of the things I do mention in the book, and became even more prominent afterwards, was the number of redeployments of people. They go out 4 or 5 times, not a whole bunch of time in between, which was incredibly punishing to them and to their families and to anyone who wanted to kind of create a life.
You talk about an action that the group IVAW did in St. Louis, and it also sort of connected to the title of your book. Could you talk about that?
Yes. And this was, I think, when I first realized this is the book I wanted to write. It was 2007 in St. Louis. It was their 3rd annual meeting, and it was at the annual convention of Veterans for Peace, who had helped IVAW get off the ground. And there was a Missouri Black Jobs Expo going on just down the street from the hotel where their meeting was going on. And someone noticed the Army unloading trucks, and they said, we got to do something. So they kind of organized amongst themselves, and they decided it would be a sound-off. And there were, I think, 90 members at the meeting, and probably most of them went, and they were wearing their IVAW T-shirts that stenciled across the front, so you couldn't miss them. And they went strutting into the Army booth that said, Go Army. And Go Army had a video game, essentially, a simulation game, which they claimed was the real world. It simulated the real world experience of U.S. Soldiers. And these real U.S. soldiers who knew that it wasn't a simulation went in there, and they stood in company formation, and they had a call and response, and it was Iraq Veterans Against the War, what do you say? And they yelled, war is not a game. And it was just, it echoed around this big convention center. It was incredibly exciting to watch, and it was incredibly exciting for them because it was kind of their first independent action.
You talked about a really sad story about a soldier who sort of grew disillusioned with the war and tried to get CO status, so they put him in a burn pit. Now, that over the last couple of weeks, the New York Times have been talking about the burn pit. So could you mention that story?
Yeah, I guess I want to back up a little. That the book, in many ways, is very sad. There are a lot of sad stories. No one seems to escape from war unscathed, and a lot of these people didn't escape with much less than that. But it's a kind of a balance, because on the one hand, there are people who are trying to do something about it, and that's exciting. On the other hand was this young man named Joshua Castile, who was indeed trying to do something about it. He was a very smart young man, a very idealistic, committed man, educated, He had been in ROTC, and so he knew he was going to have to go to Iraq, and he considered being a chaplain, felt he couldn't do that. So he became an Arab linguist and an interrogator. And he was at Abu Ghraib about 5 months, I think it was, after the photos became public, so it was very edgy sort of time. He was in the middle of an interrogation, and the exchange he had with the youngish man, I guess similar in his age, made him understand at that moment that he could no longer do that. And so he informed his superiors he wouldn't, and eventually applied for CO and did get it, but not right away. And so they reassigned him, and they reassigned him to what are known as burn pits. That's where the munitions that had been rounded up around the country were dumped and burned around the clock. Joshua came home, he continued his education. He wrote a one-act play called Returns, which was about his time as an interrogator. It was produced a couple of places. He was getting a doctorate, and all of a sudden he became very ill. And it turned out he had a very virulent form of cancer that was extremely rare in someone his age. And Joshua died, I think it's about 2 years ago, at the age of 32. And he was quite convinced it was related to the burn pit. His family still is, and they are...
I assume these burn pits didn't have state-of-the-art containment so that the person wouldn't be breathed.
Not only the person who was nearby, but everyone in the town, village, city, all around. Part of what IVAW is working on now is something called the right to heal, and they say that right, the war is not over, they say, for anybody, and that right extends also to the Iraqis who experience terrible birth defects, rates of cancer in certain of the towns where the burn pits were, and they are trying to get restitution to Iraqis. And needless to say, it's not running full speed ahead, unfortunately.
And that was really going to be my last question. The group still exists, and it's not just Iraq, it's also Afghanistan vets too.
Yeah, they're working on changing their name to reflect their mission and their membership better, and they need to, obviously. It's veterans of both of those wars, and it will continue to be veterans of the wars that we will continue to have. It does still exist. It's periodically seems to go through a reassessment, and it is now, but it's working. It's got a couple of very lively projects, including something called the Poster Project, in which somebody has produced posters, a portfolio of posters about IVAW's actions, and that will be available pretty soon. They're working on the right to heal. A lot of stuff they've done out of Fort Hood and also internationally. They're working with the Center for Constitutional Rights. And they continue to speak out about their experiences, which is also the bedrock of what they've done and very, very important.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.